down there. It's gorgeous, gorgeous day. Well, the Trump rally ranking among the top 5 post-election rallies in history. But is it just the beginning of a huge run-up in stocks? Joining me now is Trump economic advisor, Fox News contributor Steve Moore, Scott Martin of Kingsview Asset Management, and a Fox News contributor, and Jack Howe of Barron's Magazine. A great group. Steve, first to you. Now, we put together a list of post-election rallies, big post-election rallies. The biggest actually was by Herbert Hoover, and of course that was just on the eve of the Great Depression. But right next to him, number 2, is John F. Kennedy. Huge post-election rally of 8.8%, and then it went straight up from there. I assume, I'm just taking a wild guess, Steve, but I assume you think Trump's going to be more like JFK than Hoover.
Well, I sure hope so. And by the way, I don't think anyone wants to have their name in the same name as Herbert Hoover when we did see the Great Depression and
but JFK ain't bad.
Yeah, that's true. And look, we saw the market explode in the 6 weeks or so after the election. Now it's been kind of dwindling down a little bit. We flirted with the 20,000 mark. But here's the point. Long term, I think if you invest right now in the stock market and Donald Trump does the things that says he's going to do, and there's always a risk premium of whether he can get this done. But David, I'm here to say if he does get it done, if he does get those business tax down and the regulations down and the energy policies put in place, I do think you see a big boom. And by the way, in the Reagan years, that boom lasted for 18 years. So
exactly.
It could be the start,
Great point, Steve.
Really big.
Jack, Goldman Sachs had an interesting piece today, or an interesting comment today. They said if you look for stocks from companies that have been paying a lot in taxes and corporate taxes and don't qualify for any of the loopholes, those are the stocks to get, because those are the ones who are going to see their stock or their tax costs go way down. You agree?
I do agree with that with one caveat. It's true. I think, if anything, the infrastructure stock market play is a little overdone right now. The tax cut play is a little underdone. Some of these names deserve bigger price hikes. But when you look at the companies that pay the most taxes in the U.S., it's dominated by domestic companies. There are a lot of retailers, and retail is in trouble. Don't go loading up on retail shares just because they pay a lot in taxes. 3 names I'll give you quickly. Discover Financial, which I like anyhow, with or without a tax cut. CVS, which I think is more a healthcare business than a retailer. Its prices come way down. And Altria, which sells smokes here in the U.S. It's a little pricey for my taste, but it would sure look cheaper with a big tax cut.
Good stuff. Thank you very much. Scott, the CME. You were at the CME today in Chicago. I can't think of any trading floor that is more pro-Trump than the folks in the CME. Am I wrong on that?
David, you are 115% right, in fact, which is about the value of the stock of the CME these days, because it's risen dramatically since the election for 2 reasons. One, because, yes, the CME is pro-Trump, and number 2, because of interest rates. Interest rates have gone up, especially on the long end of the curve. That is good for exchange stocks.
All right, slashing government spending, President-elect Trump aiming to cut funding dramatically and shrink bureaucracy with the goal of cutting $10.5 trillion in federal spending over the next 10 years. Steve Moore, I think he sent a message with the inauguration. I mean, they were very proud to say that they came in 20% under budget and they're returning money to the Treasury. That sets the tone, doesn't it?
It sure does. And by the way, people shouldn't be surprised by this story, because I think Donald Trump was pretty clear about this, that he was going to increase spending on military and infrastructure, that we were going to have a tax cut, but he was going to balance the budget by cutting just about everything else. And you're looking at maybe some pretty severe cuts in these domestic programs. And that's why it's interesting when you talk to the Commerce Department secretary or the energy or the education sector. Yeah. They're going to have to cut their budgets very significantly to make room for these other the tax cuts and the increase in the military and the infrastructure spending, because the Republicans are still a fiscally conservative party. They still want a budget that within 5 to 8 years balances.
See, Jack, I am not surprised by this, because I think that, like most big business guys, when running something, he's basically cheap as hell. And he wants to do it and he wants it to make sense. But if you listen to people who are focused on the spending, like Charlie Gasparino talking about, Trump is talking about spending on infrastructure, spending on so many different things. He was part of the group that was worried that he was going to be a wild spender. What do you think?
Well, we'll see how this shakes out. I'll tell you one thing that really burns me is when I know that union labor has been so weakened in the private sector because they've had to come to grips with economic reality. They haven't done that yet in the public sector. You have all these protected positions. It kills me that we allow these unions to negotiate against the boss, right? But the boss in this case is me. The money's coming out of my pockets. Why do my lawmakers allow the existence of these unions to negotiate against my interest? I don't know. If Trump can do something to weaken the position of government unions, I'll be happy.
Scott Martin, amen. I mean, I'm weeping tears at what Jack just said. Every taxpayer.
I'm not a
in the
total
country
communist,
is.
Melissa. Sometimes, you
And
know.
Melissa, if there's anybody that can do it, to Jack's point, it's probably Donald Trump, who has experience with tens of thousands of workers over the course of his career. And I'll tell you, looking forward about how he's going to approach some of the spending cuts. Look at how he called Boeing to the carpet on the cost of Air Force One, how he's talked about Lockheed Martin being too expensive on some of the things. I mean, all the things that are involved in spending cuts that a lot of the other presidents didn't want to touch, he's going to find, and that's going to save us millions that'll add up to billions.
Steve Moore, it is about being a better steward of your and my tax dollar, right?
You know, I don't know if you all saw the story today. A survey, 1 out of 3 federal employees is talking about quitting their jobs over protest of Trump.
Woohoo!
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
is that good news or what? We've just cut the budget a lot right there. But look, I think Trump, one of the reasons he was so attractive to voters, I mean, this is such an obvious point, but it's worth repeating. He's a businessman. He does know how to cut expenses. He knows how to make the expenditures match the receipts. It's something that hasn't happened in Washington in a long time.
Okay.
I think he's committed to doing it.
Thank you so much, guys. Dave, breaking news.
Okay, a little business news in here.